After more than 10 years of training calisthenics in the park, this past year I've been combining it with gym workouts to train weighted calisthenics, also known as street lifting. In my case, it wasn't just about occasionally going to the gym to do some weighted exercises. I made it a priority. I structured a training periodization and progressively increased my numbers, training with weights at least 3 times a week. This way, I've truly experienced what it's like to train with added weight and have been able to appreciate the differences, advantages and disadvantages compared to traditional calisthenics. In this video, I want to share my experience with you in case it helps with your own training. We'll see if weighted calisthenics really brings something that makes a huge difference, if traditional calisthenics has something unique that sets it apart, which one delivers the better results, and much more. Before we start, just a quick reminder that you can support me by using my code JEDI on Procis to get a 10% discount on supplements, sport equipment and healthy foods, plus free gifts depending on your order value and redeemable points for more rewards. Thank you so much for your support. Let's start with the most obvious differences. The ones you notice right away but are important to highlight because for some people and certain situations they can be decisive. The first big difference is that to train weighted calisthenics you usually need to access to a gym. Some people bring weights to the park using weighted vests, stones or other makeshift solutions, but this isn't the most practical or common approach. Plus, it's not very efficient for progressing. For example, if you need to do dips with 70 kilos, it's hard to reach that weight with just vests and stones. Some people have pull-up bars set up at home, but that's not the most common scenario either. This means that to train weighted calisthenics, you'll most likely need to pay for a gym membership, whereas traditional calisthenics requires no such expense. That's something important to consider. On top of the gym fee, you might also need to buy some gear. A weight belt is essential for weighted calisthenics and most gyms don't provide one. I've trained in some gyms that had a deep belt, but usually there was only one available for everyone. Sometimes it was already in use or I felt uncomfortable holding it for 2 hours while others were waiting. So in the end, it was much more convenient to buy my own. Luckily, a basic weight belt isn't too expensive, mine cost around 20 euros. If you reach a high level in weighted calisthenics or want to compete, you'll probably need additional equipment like elbow sleeves, knee sleeves and a squat belt. At that point, the investment could go beyond 200 euros, but that's only necessary if you are competing or lifting very heavy. Another downside of training in a gym is that it might be overcrowded. You could end up waiting to use the pull-up bar, the dip station or the squat rack. And if you want to use machines as well, it can be even more frustrating. It's interesting how, even when calisthenics bars are packed with people, the training flow is completely different. In the park, everyone uses the bars when it's their turn for a set and then steps away so the next person can use them. In gyms, there's an unspoken rule that if someone is using a piece of equipment, it's theirs until they are done. And if you want to use it, you have to wait or ask to take turns. This isn't the case in the park because there's no need to load weights onto machines or use towels. So far, that's another advantage for traditional calisthenics. Another seemingly minor but significant issue for calisthenics athletes is that most gyms don't allow you to go barefoot or use chalk. Being barefoot can be important for certain exercises like handstands, planches, or front lever, and chalk is crucial for most workouts in general. I found it funny how, in the gym, using chalk made me feel like a criminal. I had to apply it discreetly, constantly checking to make sure no staff members were watching so I wouldn't get scolded. I didn't do it just for fun. Training muscle-ups or weighted pull-ups without chalk is nearly impossible, especially if you want to push yourself close to your limits. I had to switch to liquid chalk to be less noticeable and clean up any evidence after finishing my sets. Other factors, while not as critical, still make a difference. Music, for instance, you can't choose it in the gym, and the playlist is often repetitive and not great. Another one is being able to train shirtless, which is a big comfort for many calisthenics athletes. All of this contrasts sharply with the park, where you might find yourself in a full-on chalk party with good music chosen by the group, and everyone training barefoot and shirtless. Another issue I had in the gym was finding a space for planche or handstand training. With so many people around, it was hard to find even a couple of square meters to do my workout without bumping into someone stretching or doing abs nearby. Again, this is totally different in the park. If you need space, you can just move to the side and have as much room as you want. In terms of socializing and group training, traditional calisthenics wins again. In the park, it's easier to meet people, train together, motivate each other, and chat between sets. In contrast, in the gym, most people keep to themselves and don't socialize much. As a positive point for the gym, though, you do have access to weightlifting exercises like powerlifting or Olympic lifts, which you can combine with your calisthenics training. And if you are into CrossFit, well, maybe you should just go to a CrossFit box. Lastly, let's talk about the weather. Gyms have the advantage of allowing you to train regardless of the temperature or conditions outside. If you train in a park, you are somewhat dependent on the weather. Of course, if you do traditional calisthenics, you can always train at home when the weather is bad, but that's not always ideal. Personally, I'm lucky to live in the Canary Islands, where the weather is almost always great, so this isn't a big issue for me. But if you live somewhere with harsh winters or extreme summers, this could be an important factor. So, in terms of logistics, the main advantages of the gym are access to weights and machines and not being affected by the weather. On the other hand, traditional calisthenics wins in terms of cost, training comfort, and social atmosphere. Depending on which factors matter most to you, you might prefer one over the other. In my case, I'll share my final opinion at the end, but we still need to analyze the differences in results and personal experience. So let's keep going. Now, let's talk about the results you can achieve with each of these training methods. One of the main advantages of weighted calisthenics is that, by definition, it forces you to train absolute strength and makes it much easier to reach a training intensity close to failure. This means that if your goal is to develop strength and hypertrophy, street lifting has you covered. That doesn't mean you can't build strength or muscle with traditional calisthenics. However, to train for those goals without weights, you need a solid understanding of programming or good coaching. Most people who train calisthenics without a structured plan or proper knowledge tend to focus on relative strengths in relation to their body weight, endurance, and skills. The same goes for leg training. You can definitely train legs effectively with traditional calisthenics, but you need to know how to do it and be willing to put in the necessary intensity and volume. With weighted calisthenics, it's easier because heavy squats are one of the staple exercises. This guarantees at least some level of progress in both strength and leg hypertrophy. As a result, the average physique of street lifting athletes tend to show more muscle mass and better leg development. That's not to say you can't find similar examples in traditional calisthenics, but they are less common. I also want to emphasize the importance of intensity because I think this is one of the key factors, and it's partly the athlete's responsibility. See, it's easy to go to the park, do a few sets of 10 pull-ups, 15 dips or 20 push-ups, chat with friends for a bit and then go home. Or to repeat the same routine over and over because you have already mastered it. But with that approach, intensity is missing. To achieve good aesthetic results and improve your physical capabilities, you need to push yourself close to failure, close to your limits. That's the only way to grow, even if it is more demanding and exhausting. Weighted calisthenics athletes have it a bit easier in this regard, because progressively adding weight naturally pushes them to their limits. Over time, they are constantly trying to lift heavier and improve their numbers, which automatically keeps them training with high intensity. To summarize this section, if your goal is to build absolute strength and gain noticeable muscle mass, weighted calisthenics makes it easier. If you want to improve endurance, relative strength, or skill-based movements, traditional calisthenics is the better choice. Regardless of which one you choose, you need to train with the right intensity, otherwise you won't get good results in either. Now let's talk about my personal experience with both training styles, how I felt and what I took away from each one. After months of training weighted calisthenics in the gym and then returning to the park, the first thing that came to mind was that training in the park feels much more enjoyable and fulfilling. I would even say it feels more meaningful, almost spiritual, compared to working out in a commercial gym filled with machines, mainstream music and crowded spaces. There's something special about training in the park and realizing that with just a few bars you can have a complete, intense and effective workout. That feeling is unique and something I don't experience in the gym. It's also much more enjoyable to share the space with a group of people you know, where you can take turns, chat and joke around. In contrast, in the gym you are surrounded by strangers and some people are just impatiently waiting for you to finish so they can take your spot. That said, one thing I did like about training with weights is the feeling of having completely exhausted my body by the end of the session. The ease of adding intensity in weighted calisthenics makes you leave every workout knowing you have pushed your limits and that your body will grow and progress. That's definitely a positive. On the other hand, with traditional calisthenics, I feel like I can go to the park to disconnect from the world, while with weighted calisthenics, I feel like I need to leave the gym and go home to disconnect. As you can probably guess by now, in my opinion, traditional calisthenics has a unique feel that weighted gym training simply doesn't match. If I had to choose just one, I'd stick with traditional calisthenics. Luckily, I don't have to choose, I can do both, and that's exactly what I'm doing. The main advantages of weighted calisthenics are that it makes it easier to build muscle, both in the upper and lower body, and to develop total strength. So, if that's your primary goal, it's a solid option. But aside from that, I think traditional calisthenics has the edge in every other aspect. Before wrapping up, I just want to remind you that in Calisthenia app you'll find workout routines and training programs for both traditional calisthenics, whether at the park or at home with no equipment, and weighted calisthenics for the gym. Check it out. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And remember, you can support me by using the code Geray on Prosis and by following me on Instagram @GerayAlonso. That's all for now. See you in the next video.